Okay, well, thank you for coming on during your evening and sharing this time together. I have a few slides that I thought maybe I could share with you, and happy to connect and chat following as you see fit. And so I want to thank you for taking your time and for being with us this evening. So I am just going to share my screen so I have a little bit of a presentation. Here we go. So I think I need to just start that. Let's see. Okay, so. Okay, lovely. Okay, so Augie, I guess I'll just continue through the presentation, and if there's questions, we can get to them at the end, unless you want to moderate throughout. But it's I'm happy to go back and forth as you see fit as well.
I'll let you take the lead on that. So
okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so I just thought I'd share a view of a paradigm of leadership that, quite frankly, I've probably been working on probably for about 15, 20 years. And then it really actually started with a presentation that I did at Acadia, believe it or not, years ago. And it was about working with university students to think through beyond the four walls of the academic institution and building themselves as a whole person, and thinking of themselves as a holistic leader within their lives. And I don't distinguish between work and life. I really don't think that the work-life balance notion is really one that works, in the sense that it's not about working overtime or not. It's really just about thinking of yourself as a whole person. And so I actually started this exercise that I'll get into as a reflective one, but I actually use it now more in the sense of thinking through my future and where I want to go as a person, and my work and my life, and how I intentionally carve out activities or actions or behaviors that I think are important for me and my personal development. So without a doubt, it's connected to me being a woman in leadership positions. And so, as Augie mentioned, my 30 years, I actually started in sport in 1987. And so back then, there really were not a lot of women in leadership positions. And in fact, I started off in a quite junior role very intentionally, and I'll walk you through that. So let me just take you through a little bit of a journey, and you'll see this is kind of to date paradigm and using DNA, but I would encourage you to think of what model resonates with you and how you would interpret where you've come to at this point in your life and where you want to go to over the decades. So I'll start with this first strand of DNA, and this is really my personal life on in how the circumstance that I came into and the things that resonated with me for my lifetime. So if you go all the way to the left, you'll see the decades or the years on the bottom. And you'll see that I was born in Aylmer in 1965. My father was a Francophone and my mom is an Anglophone. And it really was a gift for me that I had this language duality, which was in our household. And it was really an important foundation, and has been a very important foundation. Language has been a very important foundation in my life. I'm the youngest of seven. It was really, I'm a product of the time of the 60s. And I really, I had a childhood in a pseudo farm, and really, quite loved my upbringing. The next point you'll see on this screen. And so really, this is about me identifying for you those things that resonate for me. So music is a very important part of my life. I argue that music and culture and sport are a collective package of passion that a person can have. And I do feel a close association with all of those. And so I started to learn classical guitar. And why I bring that up here is not just because of music, but because the intention of offering kids, and actually even as you grow older, a menu of options of things that you can select and try and diversify yourself, where you might find things that are enjoyable or that you don't connect with. All of it is good. And it really is just that intention of being mindful about diversifying yourself as you go through life, as I continue to go through my life. 1985, I took my first trip over to Europe. Oh my goodness, I can still remember it. And it was really where I realized that the world, visiting the world was really important to me. Taking the risk in 87 to go move to Montreal. Risk, we all know risk is important. Risk builds resiliency. The right risk builds resiliency. And so I bring that up as well, because I think it's something we all should reflect on, risk building resiliency. And you would have seen, I think it was the Association of Pediatricians who talked about the fact that we need to have play. We need to let our children experience some level of risk, whether it's at the park or in their own independence, because that really is where resiliency is built. And then, of course, I followed a pathway of marriage. I had a couple of children. I made a personal goal for myself in my 30s to learn piano. That goal continues to this day. My goal is to learn to play the violin and to actually record something using all three instruments. And of course, that's going to be probably in my 70s, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. I like that idea. So you'll see that, you know, it was really just a life of arts and culture and sport fit in there, but it was recreational sport for myself. So what's critical on this one that I would share with you that's really important is I had stage 3 breast cancer in 2014. And why that's important is because it taught me how much sport trains a person to deal with the unanticipated. If you think of the field of play, any field of play, there is always an unanticipated move, either by an athlete around you, a colleague, a competitor. It does not matter, the elements, etc. And so, you know, having spent my years in sport at the lower levels of competition and then in sport as an administrator, it really did teach me. I know that when I received that diagnosis, that my resiliency was partly due to my experience and my life training and how I was able to manage and navigate through surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, through that experience because of the gift of sport. So when we talk to those around us and we think of our own lives, the gift of sport resonates in many ways, and much of which we're not expecting. So I feel that that is an important message that we all can share about the value and the importance of sport. Then you'll just see, of course, traveling continues to be a passion of mine, and I've been to 50 countries, and I really love meeting the culture, meeting the architecture, meeting the people, experiencing what a gift it is to live in Canada, and how lucky we are. It resets me every time I step back on Canadian soil. And so that's really this is the one strand on the DNA that I want to share with you. And I think part of this is really important for me to say here is when we interview individuals, when we bring people into our organizations, lived experience is as important, if not in some instances more important, than the skills, the necessary skills and or the competencies that an individual brings into a job interview and then into a job. So value what you do here. It's really critical. And I just suggest to you that embracing the gifts that you've been given and the challenges that you've been given are really important as you go into any job or any career, and as you go through your life. The next phase is what I would call my, traditionally would be called avocation, but my volunteer capacity throughout the years. And these are not representative of everything that I've done, but I think they're critical pieces that are important for me to share. And the reason they're important for me to share is has a few, it'll come across in a few different ways. So the first is at 1982, I was like 13 years old, but my parents helped me to understand and exercise my civic duty. And so I really do think that my parents actually set me up with a notion about civic duty and about contribution to society and the benefits that gives you as a person very early on. And I think, if you were to look at all of these roles, in some instances, it was really about the contribution back to a society or the community and within which I lived. But in other instances, it was very intentional as a female leader. So an example of that would be in, if you were to look at 2006 and 2005. In 2006, I was involved in the Ontario Summer Games. I was invited to contribute and maybe be a committee director, but at that point in time, I felt that I needed to have resumes on my titles on my resume that demonstrated my leadership capacity and capability. And so it was an instance in which I said, I'm interested in being the co-chair of the Summer Games and not a committee chair. And they accepted, and I took on that leadership role, and it really did help shape my resume. So I think what I'll just share with you here is that I never finished my university. So right now, Augie's falling off as chair. But anyway, I did about a year and a half of university at the University of Ottawa, but I never completed it for many reasons. And so part of my volunteer experience was making sure I could demonstrate expressions of leadership, that I could challenge myself to be in different environments outside of sport, and that I could contribute to the community in which I lived. And so some of these were very intentional about demonstrating that capacity and that leadership skill. There are others in here that are more personal. So obviously some of the cancer work, I have an epileptic son. So in 2013, my personal therapy, having had a very seriously epileptic child, was to get into the epileptic community and volunteer my time and immerse myself into that community so I could understand the challenges and help others as I help myself with dealing with epilepsy. If you see 2017 and 2021, that's ICCE, as Augie mentioned, is the International Council for Coaching Excellence, and that's an international role that I play. I've spent the last 5 or 6 years very focused on ethics and sports safety. And so that is really part of the role that I play internationally. And there are other pieces outside of this that I've done in Singapore, in South Africa, and other countries where I've tried to contribute to ethics and sports safety. And then this one is really what we would call the traditional career roles. So I started in 1987. I worked for an organization that's now defunct called the Canadian Intramural Recreation Association. I mentioned that I didn't have a university degree. Back then, as a female leader, you really couldn't come into a program manager or coordinator role if you didn't have a degree. And so I came in as a very junior secretary. I can still remember making $11,500 and feeling very proud of myself that I got into the Canadian sports system. And then I was very intentional from there about the roles that I chose. So if you went up from 87 to 88, you'd see that I learned the ability to do desktop publishing. So for all of you now, you're going, what does that mean? Well, quite frankly, in 1988, Apple computers came into being. and desktop publishing, it was taken away from the drafting table and put into a computer. And so I was very entrepreneurial in nature, and I knew I had to build the dimensions of my career, not just in a secretarial mode, because it was really something for me that I wanted to grow into different leadership roles. And then I had the opportunity to work for the Olympic Committee. And I'll just share with you that the reason I got that job at the Olympic Committee is because I heard a man who worked in the sports system on the bus talking about the need to fill a public relations coordinator. So I interrupted him, introduced myself, and got my resume in, and I was lucky to get the job. So research is very clear. Individuals who diversify their daily routines tend to be exposed to more opportunities, and by that very nature have opportunities and or interactions with individuals that they necessarily wouldn't. So don't have your coffee in the same seat every day at 8 a.m. Make sure you go to different coffee shops and talk to different people and get in there. In the year 2000, I actually left sport. I needed a bit of a break. Sport is all consuming, all passionate, and I needed to diversify myself again. So I went to work in business development, and took 2 years to learn a different industry, learn a different business. I felt that was a very important challenge for me to grow professionally and personally, at which point I was able to come back as the Chief Operating Officer in 2002 to the Coaching Association of Canada. I stayed in that role for about 4 years, and then decided that my next move was to be a Chief Executive Officer. So I needed to leave coaching, which was my passion, is my passion, and it was a bit of a heartbreak. But I took a step sideways, and I went to be the CEO of the Canadian Cycling Association, which is now Cycling Canada, and then continued on from there to be the CEO of Canoe Kayak Canada. I continue my entrepreneurial journey, and then to return in 2013 when my predecessor, John Bales, retired as the CEO, to be able to come back in. So what does that all mean? Why am I taking you through these 3 strands of DNA? Well, the reason is this. This is the type of conversation that I love having with people, whether it's people that I work with, or that I interview, or that I meet. The opportunity to see an individual's depth and to share journeys beyond what's your job title, where do you work, is such a critical piece of importance for me as a person. I do feel it's part of appreciating your identity as a person versus as an association with a company or with a job title, so that you go through life understanding the richness and depth of yourself as a person. And I think, I'm not sure of the profile of the individuals on this call, but if you're younger, I encourage you to think this through, to walk back in what you've done before, take a walk forward in what you might want to do. And you don't have to share it with anybody. It's really just the opportunity to envision where you might want to go and give yourself a pat on the back for what you've done. And the other part of this is it's okay to allow yourself to take breaks. So in terms of volunteerism or other aspects of your life, if you need breaks, in this day and age of post-COVID mental health, that's such an important caring space for all of you for all of us, myself included, and it's not always easy to be able to be able to reflect on and to give yourself permission. So as much as this is an important aspect of your development, it's equally important of your development to be able to take pauses and to recover and regenerate as well. Okay, let's see, where are we going? So now I'm going to shift gears a little, And I'm just going to talk a little bit about some journey and or leadership concepts or personal beliefs that I think are really critical. So this slide is really just about beyond the classroom. So university is such a gift. It is such an opportunity and a privilege. And I think of that every day, given my career and my inability to have completed a university degree. But I want to help you shift a little bit and think differently. So this notion here of just in case versus just in time learning, now I've associated it here with coach development, but it's really about anybody and anything. It actually came to me from Pierre Trudel, who was with the University of Ottawa. And it's the notion of the importance and the value of classroom learning. So the notion of I am going to share and help you grow with all of this information just in case you need it. So think of the classroom and think of the concepts and the breadth and the gift of learning, the gift of learning how to learn that you are given in the just in case notion of development of the person. And then shift away from that and think about just-in-time learning. So if you think about the previous DNA slide, the notion of where do I want to go and what do I need to get there? And so that's the notion of just-in-time. It's the ability to plan and think through your learning, and whether it's mediated or unmediated or however it works for you as an individual, and embrace that. So think about and prepare for that just-in-time development. And I think about that all the time. I am always trying to work through my year and understand where and when and what I need to do. So an example for me right now is related to AI. It's probably relevant for all of us, but I would suggest to you that when these opportunities come up, it's really about thinking, oh my goodness, what do I need to learn? Or who do I need to talk to help me understand what I need to learn? And where is it that I want to go? And that's a really powerful tool that serves you well through your journey, personally and professionally. And it's really an important concept that I really appreciate. Of course, you could call it professional development, but I think this is more specific. I think this is more about you as an individual and customizing what's important for you. Whether it has an application in the short term or in the longer term, I just think it's really critical. The next thing I want to talk about is one of the things that I think is such a powerful tool for individuals to embrace and to build the muscle. And so that's the ability to synthesize. So the ability in our complex world, in your complex environments, in your daily life, to be able to consume the information that you're being provided or the environment that you're in, and to then reinterpret it and use it as a leadership advantage. So one of the things that I like to think about in my job is I feel like I have an important role to bring the future into the present faster. Okay, so that's a really interesting place to play, where you think through, where are we going? We just talked about AI, and what is it that I can do to help us adapt and evolve faster to be able to contribute and support development? And that's not always easy. It's a complex, I would like to call it, algorithm. But it is a place where I tend to spend a fair bit of time. So for the Coaching Association, one might go back and I'd be thinking about, okay, mental health. Where is it that we need to get to over these past few years to address the mental health of the coaching population, of the athlete population, and how do we help them? How do we deal with our staff and our post-COVID trauma, collective trauma, and how we work through? So if you think about that, there are many parts that you're bringing together to try to make sense of in order to build, rebuild, adapt, impact. And I think that's a really important skill set that I like to spend some time on. And on that note, if you've ever had a chance to look at any of the literature readings out of the World Economic Forum, I really encourage you to spend time, not all of it, but absolutely it is an important space, the annual conference, and you'll see all of the thought leaders bringing forward what they think we should be thinking about. And again, that's bringing the future into the present faster. It's reflective of current society, but I also think it's reflective of future. So this is their top 10 skills for 2025. And it's really neat. I'll show you the next slide after, but to see how it has evolved over time, where we're seeing words in the top 10 skills around resilience, obviously technology, social influence. That's the first time that's shown up this year. Creativity's been there for a while. Analytical thinking and innovation, active learning and learning strategies. So we just talked about just-in-time learning, complex problem solving. And so the trend of the future, and of course we know AI and the need for workforces to retool themselves. Well, what a better place to get ahead of lean in. I love leaning in, lean in, even if it makes you uncomfortable, and think through what you might do to build these competencies and skills that might help you. And so now I'm going to show you the 2020 and the 2015. So if we go back up here, you can see the skills for 2025. So just look at this retrospective. Look at 2020 and 2015. So in 2015, number 10 was creativity. In 2020, it's number 3. So you can see where complex problem solving, although they give it different words in 2025 and they add a dimension to it, you'll see that those skill sets of synthesizing, of ability to manage complex environments, the ability to interpret and think through and vision are really important. You can see the top 5. There's some really critical ones that I think are really powerful for us to wrap our heads around in some ways and proactively build and design our just-in-time learning. So we build these muscles that help us in our jobs and in our careers. And then this is really my last slide because I feel like I've talked a little bit too much, but I'm going to leave you here. The number one thing for me is truly about culture. And so I can't stress how much I have conversations about culture. We as an organization defined our aspirational values in 2018. We just did it again with our entire this summer, and it's going to be the aspirational values class of 2024, because culture is evolving and organic and dynamic and needs to expand and needs to move in different directions. And it's not about you fit the culture or you don't fit the culture. To me, that is the worst place and space. The conversation around culture is how do we collectively behave? How do we collectively believe? How do we collectively express our environment and our actions and our ethics and on our people? How do we allow and support individuals to come in and help us expand our view of a culture that is thriving and performing and safe for everyone? And so at this stage of my career, this is the space that I love the most. I love the idea of being able to talk through and understand culture, because too often it's unwritten and it's unspoken. And individuals who come into organizations or into new environments struggle because they don't understand those unwritten rules, which are quite frankly unhealthy. And so the more we can identify and embrace and discuss and celebrate and expand culture, the better off we all are as individuals and as organizations. So that's my last little piece, I think, Augie. I think that's it for me.
Thank you so much for that, Lorraine. I really appreciate that. I want to reach out to the audience and see if there are any questions now. And there is a question and answer function or app component to this. So there we go. There's a question. I'm going to read it out, Lorraine, and then you can have a look at it. The question goes like this. My question is about emotional intelligence, since it was added to the 2020 list. I developed personally and professionally in an environment that didn't always value compassion and empathy, but I currently find myself in a CEO position with an organization where emotional intelligence is often front and center. Can you speak to your experience from seeing it develop over time?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Cheryl, that's a good one. So the leader I was 10 years ago is not the leader I am today. I can remember in a previous CEO role where years ago, where I was told you need to be more directive. Okay, that is not how it works anymore. Before it was about being out front. I would suggest it was about being in the middle, and now it's being behind. And so the ability to modify your leadership styles over time is a critical one. So, you know, I would have 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, never shared any kind of personal grief or anything. You know, it was you go into the office, you put your professional face on, and that's where it starts and stops. Well, I would tell you it's not that way anymore. The ability to share your vulnerability in an organization is really important, and it gives permission to those around you to be able to do the same, you know, in an organization. And, you know, I appreciate that upbringing, that your professional upbringing that you're talking about. But I just feel like the ability to lean in, and with the appropriate balance, which is never easy, understand the environment that you're going into, have empathy for the individuals around you, having a good day, having a bad day, is absolutely a critical component of, quite frankly, coaching, but I think leadership in general, where we have to be able to create a safe space for individuals to come into in an organization or come into work every day and to be able to be themselves. And if we come in plastic, for lack of a better word, then everybody else is going to feel like they have to come in, you know, plastic. You know what I mean by that?
Thank you for that, Lorraine. Other questions? Can you read these, or do you need me to read them?
I just saw the one about men.
Okay.
I love it. So let me think that one through. I really don't feel so. I guess I should read the question. Just, can you please discuss your approach to managing men who have difficulty with female leadership? How have you found success with this? Well, let me start off by a story in 1989 when I was sitting between two men. One was a director and the other was a coordinator, and I was a coordinator, and I was actually in this board meeting, and one of the board members who I would suggest was a seasoned retired leader, walked around, saw the three of us, the two men and the one woman, and walked up to the woman in the middle and said, "Can you please go photocopy this?" So the director, who was to my left, said, "We'll find you someone who can do that. That's not her function." So allyship is huge. And so naming it and taming it, I think, is really critical for not just you as a person owning it, but actually the individuals around you. And the more you can create allyship outside of those instances where it might be inappropriate, the better off you are when you end up in that environment, you know. So it's that notion of page setting for everyone to be on that same understanding of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. The truth of the matter is I don't see it that much anymore. However, I still do a little. And one wise person once said to me, and I don't know if this is okay, but I'm going to say it anyway: you could go over in the corner and bark with the dog who's being yappy in the corner, or you can just keep leading. And so that was kind of the words that I took to heart at one point in my career that really made a big difference for me in managing difficult people, because I'm not sure it's about men. It's really actually about accepting female leadership. I actually think it's just about accepting a person's leadership. And then, finally, I think I would just say leadership is a collective voice. It's not unindividual. It's a collective voice of individuals around an organization. And I don't know. That's kind of interesting, but I'd be happy to have a side conversation if that's something anybody is dealing with and they would like to understand a challenge that they're dealing with and maybe how to navigate that. And for sure, I'm 59, so it's a different stage for me because age bias comes into play. Whereas when I was 35 and I was a CEO, maybe I had more challenges at that point, but that was also a different time and place, so that's an interesting one to reflect on. Old boys club. Oh my goodness. Oh, you listen to these questions. Okay, so
they're fantastic.
I love them. So what do I say? Don't let anybody take anything away from you. I guess that I wish I would have told my 30-year-old self that advice. So whether it's intentional or not intentional, and trust me, I've been through what I would describe as some old boys clubs over the time and space. They can only get away with it if you accept it. And that's easier said than done. So I think that's my first kind of piece. Now, of course, there's strength in numbers. So if it's 10 men and one woman, which I've definitely been in those circumstances, I think that, I don't know if this is, I guess what I would say is if I were in a really difficult position, and I'll bring something forward here, for allyship, I would, even though this is unfortunate, I would look for allyship. I would find the person in the room who listens to you for the incredible contribution that you give. And I would have separate conversations with that individual about how can collectively the organization become more effective by listening to your voice. And I will tell you this, one of the most interesting things is, if it's quite fascinating how at some tables, a woman can say something and then the conversation will go on, and then a man will say something and they'll listen to that person. So the reason I bring that up is because I think that's the ally you need in the room, so that you have an individual who can say to you, or can say to the table, as so-and-so, as Casey said, how this is an important point that we should reflect on what she brought forward. So the more you can design intentional spaces where allies uphold the strength of all the leaders in the room when they speak, I think that's really intentional. So that would be one of my strategies. And then if there's no allies at the table, then I would be reflecting on a role and on different strategies, to be quite frank. So then the next one is, and if you don't feel like I'm answering the question, you can say answer again, and I'll be like Chat GPT and I'll try to give you another answer. Okay, so the next one is, thank you for sharing your experience. It was great to hear how you took on new challenges throughout your career in order to grow. Reflecting back, how did you know when it was time to seek out new challenges? So that's a really interesting thing. The minute you don't come into work every day and your heart and your head are not in it consistently, that's when you need to seek out new challenges. So that's one. Okay, so that's a really important metric for me. So my head and my heart went into high tech for 2 years because I knew I needed to learn and I needed to challenge myself to go into a for-profit industry, and I needed to take risk. And the irony about risk is what actually make you feel more confident. Okay, so taking on new challenges is what creates confidence. The irony is, in some instances, we think if we continue to hone the same craft or the same job, that is actually what builds confidence. It's actually quite the opposite as far as I'm concerned. The ability to throw yourself in new environments and to give yourself new challenges. Oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this. Or this is a big mountain, or this is a risk. All of those are good statements. Because it forces you as a person to challenge yourself to try. And it's okay to fail. It's okay to fail. And I know it hurts. And that's the gift of failing. When it hurts, it helps you to learn. And so I think that's really important. So that's one answer that I'm going to give you, but I'm going to give you a second answer. And it really is related to the fact that I never finished my university degree. I was very intentional, if you were to look at my career path, to change jobs every 4 to 5 years. Okay. And the reason I did that is because I had very intentional motivation, internal motivation to take on the CEO role. I started, as a junior secretary. I moved into public relations as a female in the 80s and 90s. That was the traditional pathway, and I could see it and I understood it and I was okay with it. I was going to do it. And then I was going to challenge myself to find different roles that, quite frankly, gave me different job titles or different volunteer titles that would allow individuals to see me differently. Because when you look at my resume back then, you would go, well, she hasn't finished her university degree. And it's still a hang up for me to this day. And I've had many people to tell me to stop saying that, but I still can't help myself. It's one of those things, And so I was very intentional of changing careers, getting different job titles that allowed me to expand my knowledge, challenge myself to do different things, take on different roles. And it was really important for me to do. And my generation is a little bit more stay in a job for 10 to 20 years. When I came back to coaching in 2013, it was like my risk had paid off. Okay, so the person that I worked for back then, John Bales was the CEO and he wasn't going anywhere. And he was a great mentor and he gave me a lot. And I wanted his job. Okay. I wanted his job and he wasn't going anywhere. So that's the truth of the matter. And so I left and I went to run a national sport organization because I needed to learn how national sport organizations worked versus multi-sport organizations, which was the Coaching Association or the Olympic Committee. And I wanted the job title. And sometimes the truth of the matter is you need to go out to go up. And the corollary to that is sometimes you need to go out to grow and then go up. So both of those statements are true. And just be really honest with yourself and ask yourself, where do you want to be? Having fun every day? If you're saying, yes, I'm comfortable, that's the wrong answer. Unless you're in a time and space in your life where being comfortable at work is really important to you because you have disruption in your personal life, or you have stresses around parents or children, and you need to make that intentional decision, and that's okay too. But ultimately, it's about listening to your head and your heart and making sure that your head and your heart agree with your daily life.
Thank you for that, Lorraine. Any other questions or comments for our panelist?
I think I scared them all.
No, I have Lorraine, if you wouldn't mind, I have it's sort of semi-related to a couple of these last questions. If it could be the closing question, and my questions are often half-baked, so just bear with me.
Perfect.
What I appreciated about your talk is the way you sort of knitted together several sort of strands or layers of yourself, and it really spoke to a very wide notion of a career. That is, it wasn't merely about your job, but there were other moments in which you were doing, I'll call it vocational-like things. And there's that strikes me as being very tightly knitted together. And I'm just wondering, how did you figure out how to take pauses for your own well-being? How did you, in what moments, or what were the, I'll call them distant early warning signs of needing a kind of break or some decompression? Because it looks like there would have been moments in which that would have been important. And I'm just wondering, what were your cues?
So that's a really thoughtful question. I can think of times in my life when I didn't. So I'm human. So I was the CEO of Cycling Canada in 2008. No, I have to think back. No, I was CEO of Canoe Kayak in 2009, 2000 and let me think about when this happened. I promise I'm going to stop after this one. In 2012. And my son, really strange, all of a sudden started seizing. And it's a very kind of, there's, as some of you may know, epilepsy manifests in many different ways. Well, my son was almost like Tourette's, where he would yell. And so it took like 6 months to get him diagnosed with epilepsy, but I mean, he really almost died. He had like 1,000 seizures over 6 months. He was very brain damaged. It was probably one of the most traumatic periods of my life. And I continued to work. So I was trying to be super mom, super CEO. I have a daughter who's 7 years older as well, trying to take care of her. So that's an example of denial, where I didn't really effectively manage my well-being, probably to the detriment of myself. And then the following year, I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. And I'm not necessarily correlating the two, but I can tell you that I went through a time of fatigue, trying to preserve my child, and I didn't manage that effectively. So that's kind of an example of the worst moment. And that's when I should have been better at managing that. And I've learned from it, and I've listened to that ever since. So that's you learn from your painful mistakes. I think where I have been good at taking pauses is when one part of my passion consumes me. So isn't that kind of a funny thing to say? So when I'm learning something new, or when I'm in a phase with a new job, so that's a perfectly good example of a new job where I intentionally go, okay, I need to use my reserves to focus on this and then take care of myself. So that would be kind of one of those instances where I kind of instinctively focus in on one strand of my person that helps me to become better. And quite frankly, there are times where I think I've just kind of said to myself, I'm tired and I only have so much energy and I need to recover and regenerate. And I wish we would all collectively do a better job of recovery and regeneration. And we work in sport and we teach our coaches the principles of recovery and regeneration for athletic performance. We're just not great at doing it for ourselves. And so I try to pay attention to that, and I try to be intentional with that as well. So in some ways it's listening to yourself, but there's perfect is the enemy of the good, right?
Thank you very much for that. So it's now 8 o'clock, which kind of brings us to the start of the hour. I want to thank you, and I trust that the audience is also giving you a little bit of round of applause.
Thank you.
I wanted to just alert those who are listening right now that we'll be back here at this event on the 19th of November at the same time, and we're going to be listening to someone named Shireen Ahmed, and she's going to be talking a little bit about authenticity. So I encourage you all to show up at that one as well. So thank you very much, Lorraine. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Have a great evening, everyone.
Good night, folks.
Good night.